for a lot of us, our lives just got much more sedentary. That can lead to a lot more aches and pains as our bodies adapt to whatever the heck is going on in the world. So to help alleviate that, I've got 10 daily stretches to help you adapt to your new work from home lifestyle. You can do these all at once before you sit down to do work or sit down not to do work. Or you can break them up in bits and pieces throughout your day. But let's jump on in. I love a good full body dynamic stretch. Dynamic stretches take joints through their full range of motion and really prime the body for proper strength and stabilization. The inchworm specifically stretches the spine and hamstrings. You get some great shoulder and core stabilization in the plank, and then keep your legs as straight as possible on the way back up to hit the hamstrings again, as well as the calves. Personally, I prefer doing all of my moving stretches before I hit the static stretches. It's mostly a mental thing, but I prefer to get the muscle moving through the full range of motion before I hold them in a static pose. I recommend doing about 5 to 7 rounds of this, but just listen to your body. Okay, you're probably like, what the heck is this, right? So this is a chirp wheel. First of all, I want to let you know that this video is not sponsored by Chirp Wheel, but they did send me this product for free so that I could review it, see what my thoughts were, and to be honest, I was so pumped to get one of these in the mail because me and my husband have been eyeing it for such a long time. If you saw this video right up here, you saw my unboxing of the Chirp, how excited I was to try it, but I do want to let you know a little bit more about what exactly this is. So the Chirp Wheel is designed primarily to massage the muscles of your skeletal structure. You can see right in the center that there is a groove that runs throughout the entire Chirp Wheel, and this is where your spine is supposed to go, and then the muscles that run up and down your spine go right along the sides. Now, because of the unique design, this is much more effective than attempting to get the same type of stretch with a foam roller, because foam rollers are usually much longer and you can't typically hit in between the shoulder blades. So the Chirp helps you get a much more specific stretch into your back. Now, I'm not totally ready to ditch my foam roller quite yet, but I will say this has been a huge improvement on my overall back pain, back mobility. So if you guys are interested in getting a Chirp, this is a really great addition to your fitness regimen. And I have a link below. Now, as far as what you're seeing right here, I like to roll through the wheel, holding tender spots just like I would on a foam roller. And sometimes I just hang out in this airplane pose for a little while just to get a nice shoulder opener too. Typically, I take 30 seconds to a minute moving through my back here. And again, if you guys are interested, you can click that link down below. So this is like a 2-in-1 stretch, and I really like incorporating these into my daily stretching routine because this is how we move in everyday life. We don't typically just isolate one part of our body. This is essentially an example of us using the body as a unit. So you want to position one leg in front of the other and square off your hips. That's really, really important here. So you want to pull the hip of the rear leg toward the front to really activate the hip and protect the low back. Hold this for a few seconds and then hinge from the hips, forcing the back heel down until you feel your calf start to stretch. I roll through this a few times before switching to the other side. The most important thing here again is to keep those hips squared off and neutral. You really want to avoid twisting the lumbar spine here to protect the low back and get deeper into the stretch. If you know me, you've heard me say it before, we are very quad dominant as a society. It's essentially a muscle imbalance between our quads and our hamstrings. So when I say that you're quad dominant, I mean that your quads are doing a lot of the muscle action that your hamstrings are meant to be doing. So the quads become a lot more powerful, a lot more overactive, and your hamstrings typically become a lot weaker and a lot more underactive. Now, this is not good for a lot of reasons, but the number one reason is because muscle imbalances typically lead to muscle damage or injury. So especially with these muscles that are surrounding the knees, if you have a lot of quad dominance and your hip flexors are really overactive and your adductors, and then your hamstrings are really weak, your calves are really tight. A lot of these kind of muscle imbalances will lead to things like ACL tears. And that's definitely like a worst case scenario, but it does happen to a lot of everyday people. So this is why we want to make sure we're training all parts of the body, all parts of the leg, especially around that knee, equally. Now, a big reason why we do become quad dominant is because if you think of our lifestyle, we live a very sedentary lifestyle, especially right now. So our bodies, we're typically always sitting and we're always typically hunching forward. So this is putting our body in a constant state of flexion. Just to like really simplify it, if you're in flexion, that is typically the front of the body working. If you're in extension, that's typically the back of the body. That is like so simplified, but just for our purposes for a stretching video, that's what I want you guys to take away from this, okay? So we're always in this constant state of flexion, which means that things like our upper traps, things like our hip flexors, and things like our quads are always working. And then the back of our body, the things that are supposed to hold us up, are not working as much. So as you're foam rolling your quads, you wanna really concentrate on taking your time, hanging out on those tender spots. I like to do both legs at the same time and kind of shift around side to side, maybe get some internal rotation, external rotation from the hips, just to make sure you're hitting every different muscle that makes up the quad. I'll typically spend about 1 to 2 minutes here, simply because this is such a tight area for a lot of people, and then go on with my day. Whoa, this is a 3-in-1. Again, I love doing stretches like this because it's nice and active, it uses the body as a unit, and that's how we use it every day. So in this, you're hitting the hamstring, inner thigh complex, and the IT band. It's really important to stretch all of those muscles and angles of the leg, again, to prevent those muscle imbalances and protect your knee. With each stretch, be sure to keep the hips glued to the floor and squared off. It'll shorten your range of motion, but you'll actually hit the muscle that we're trying to hit here. With the leg upright, you'll hit your hamstring. The hamstring is actually a few different muscles, so feel free to move around a bit here, work through internal and external rotation of the hip. With the leg away from the body, you'll hit the inner thigh complex. Same thing, this is more than one muscle, so feel free to play around here. Just make sure both those hips are secured down to the floor. And with the leg across the body, you'll hit the IT band. You really don't need to go too far to hit this one. So again, make sure that hip is down on the floor. I spend about 30 seconds to a minute on each leg, just moving through the full ranges of motion, not really holding anything for more than 5 seconds yet. Now onto the static stretching. So static stretching is essentially when you hold a position for 30 seconds or more. You do want to make sure that you are always holding these for at least 30 seconds, or else you're not going to get that muscle release that you need to actually get the benefits of the stretch. Now this one sucks, all right? This is gonna be painful, it's not gonna be fun, but it's going to help a lot. And let me tell you why. We're trying to hit the piriformis here. This is a teeny tiny little muscle located in your butt, and it tends to be very overactive in many people who have a hard time activating their glutes. Now, just like quad dominance, people can become piriformis dominant, where this teeny tiny little muscle is doing the job of your big giant glutes. Getting this muscle to release a bit can really help with low back pain or sciatica, but it's also really important to do this anytime that you are training the glutes. So I always like to do some glute activation and piriformis release before I start doing any kind of glute exercises. The chirp wheel, ow. The chirp wheel is back. The chirp wheel is back. So I wanted to show you guys that you can use the chirp for a lot more than just working your back. I love using it in a butterfly stretch to make it a 2-in-1. So with this butterfly stretch, you're mostly focusing on hitting the hip flexors. Another common overactive muscle is typically the hip flexors, because again, we're in that constant state of flexion sitting all day, especially now. So spending some time to open them up is incredibly important to knee and back pain. Now with the chirp wheel, you're getting a nice shoulder and lat opener. It's helpful for those with less flexibility. And honestly, it helps you get more of a hip hinge, which we need a lot more of daily, and less spinal flexion, which we do not need any more of. You want to hold this for about 30 seconds until you feel your hips start to release. I mean, while we're with the chirp, we might as well just keep going with it. So we're gonna do a lat stretch on this one. I am kind of obsessed with this stretch. I've been doing it multiple times daily. You're gonna hit the lats here, which is one of the biggest muscles of the upper body. They're really important to train and stretch because they support a lot of the function of the shoulder, which we do use daily and we need a lot of mobility in. Now I love using the chirp here instead of the foam roller because honestly, it's just more comfortable. Like if I had a knot, I would definitely go in with the foam roller or a tennis ball, but this is definitely my preferred static lat stretch. Now you can do this one arm at a time, or you can put both hands on there, get a little bit more of an even stretch, and I like to do this for about 30 seconds on each side of the body. Now because we're constantly in that state of flexion that I've talked about 10,000 times now at this point, a lot of what you start to see is the lengthening of the muscles of the upper back. So kind of this like rounded forward, which then in turn will shorten your chest muscles or your pecs. So we definitely want to try and counteract that throughout the day by doing a chest opener. I like to do this stretch anytime before I sit down to my laptop and periodically throughout the day just to reinforce that proper posture. Now make sure you're avoiding shoulder elevation by retracting the shoulder blades together so you're not putting all the tension into your traps. And I like to hold this for about 30 seconds on each side. You can kind of feel when your chest is like just done. Last but certainly not least, because if you couldn't guess it, we're very trap dominant as a society. So a lot of this again happens because we're constantly sitting down all of the time. So we're in this constant state of sitting forward, shoulders elevated, we're very tense, and we're gonna put a lot of that stress into the traps, which I also, like, I'm very overdeveloped in my traps. I know, no one needs to tell me. So without proper postural mechanics, the upper traps will start to take over the function of the shoulder. This can lead to shoulder injury and make you look like a football player. This is another one that I like to do before sitting down to work and also periodically while I'm working. Now, you wanna make sure the shoulder is depressed and retracted, but also that you're not tugging on the head. And if you wanna bring that other hand behind your back to really reinforce the shoulder depression, that's always a good thing to do too. So I hope these stretches make working from home a little more physically and mentally tolerable during this crazy time that we're in right now. I will say I am still trying to be very good about implementing daily stretching into my routine. So hopefully this inspires you guys. Hopefully it keeps me accountable. If there's any other stretches that you love, definitely leave them in the comments below. And let me know if there's anything else you want to see while we're all in quarantine. I'd be happy to hear it. So hit that subscribe button, hit that little like, and I'll see you guys soon.
So treat me like I'd like, if only for